Hello everyone, it's Teacher Markee once again, and welcome to another video lecture for the subject EAPP, or English for Academic and Professional Purposes. Today's topic is Introduction to EAPP, which will cover the similarities and differences between academic text and non-academic texts, and the different factors that shape academic writing. Let us start with knowing what EAPP is. English for Academic and Professional Purposes, or EAPP, is a course that aims to improve students' communication skills in the writing medium in preparation for higher education, where the demand for academic papers in various fields of specialization is greater. Meaning to say, when you become a university or college student, one of the minimum requirements for graduation is writing an academic paper in the form of an academic journal, a research project, or a thesis. And this course could help you become more equipped and ready to write that paper. There are key similarities and differences between academic and non-academic texts. But first, let's find out what academic texts are. Academic texts are critical, objective, and specialized texts that are written by professionals or experts in a particular field. And since these are objective texts, they are based on facts. They are written in formal language and has a formal style and tone. So, the emotions and feelings of the authors are not delivered through them. Academic texts are well-focused, with citation, concise, clear, accurate, and well-constructed. Meaning, they are based on factual information and evidence, free from repetition, exaggeration, rhetorical questions, and contractions, and are almost always in the third-person point of view. Generally, academic texts debate or provide answers to a specific question in a field. But the main purposes of academic texts are to inform and to enhance the reader's understanding of a specific field. Here are some familiar examples of academic texts: essays, theses, reports, textbooks, case studies, critique papers, and research articles. Now, let's talk about non-academic texts. Non-academic texts are writings that are informal and dedicated to a lay audience. They are emotional, personal, and subjective, without any kind of research involving. Therefore, anyone can write a non-academic text. Some features of non-academic texts include general topics. When writing a non-academic text, you can explore any topics you like. The scope of topics you can write about is endless. Unlike academic texts, which uses the third-person point of view, you may use any point of view when writing a non-academic text. You may write in the first person, second person, third person omniscient, third person limited, or third person objective point of view. Non-academic texts are mostly free of rigid structures, meaning unconventional writing styles and poetic license can be applied. Contrary to academic texts in which formality is required, non-academic texts may use a less formal tone and may not necessarily require opinions of experts and authorities. You may also use casual language such as idiomatic expressions, slangs, and contractions when writing a non-academic text. The main purposes of non-academic texts are to inform, to entertain, or persuade readers. Some examples of non-academic texts are letters, emails, memoirs, newspapers, text messages, personal journal entries, and many more. Now let's see how academic and non-academic texts are similar. Academic and non-academic texts can, at times, address the same subject. For example, an article in a newspaper or magazine written for the general public could address the same subject, such as global warming. In addition, both academic and non-academic texts can be useful for researchers and students. For example, if you were trying to research data about global warming, you could read both non-academic texts in the form of newspaper and magazine articles and articles on the internet, and you could also inform yourself about the subject by reading academic texts in specialized journals. Finally, the authors of both academic and non-academic texts published for the public are required not to plagiarize. If they use other people's ideas or words, they need to cite the sources of their information. The key difference between academic text and non-academic text is that academic text is intended for the scholarly and the research community in society, while the non-academic text is intended for the general public in society. While the academic text is formal and factual, the non-academic text is informal and personal. In addition, academic texts always contain citations, whereas non-academic text may or may not contain citations. The below matrix lists more differences between academic text and non-academic texts. Now that you already know the similarities and differences between academic and non-academic texts, it is also important to talk about the different factors to consider in academic writing. The ones I will briefly discuss here are 6 general points you should take into consideration while writing academic papers. These are audience, purpose, organization, style, flow, and presentation. Considering your audience is something you should do before writing your paper. If you are a student, your audience will be your instructor or your teacher who has definitely some expectations which you will have to meet. Your audience may also be your advisors, thesis committees, journals and conference reviewers, or even your own classmates. Taking your audience into consideration will affect the content of your writing. For example, if you assume that your readers and audience are familiar with the subject you are writing about, you will not provide much background information, right? Next one is purpose. Audience and purpose are interconnected. If the audience knows less than the writer, then the purpose is instructional. But if the audience knows more than the writer, as is the case with students, the purpose will be demonstration of knowledge and expertise. So, you should be aware of the purpose of your writing as it is a decisive factor. Organization is a matter of priorities and structure. Your audience has this expectation that the information will be presented in a structured format that is suitable for the genre of the text. So there are different patterns you should take advantage of, because most readers are familiar with them, and this helps facilitate the conveyance of information. Other factors such as relevance, coherence and flow, cohesion and texture, context and message should be taken into account. Moreover, there are several established patterns of information organization which all writers make use depending on the nature of their paper. Some examples are problems and solutions, comparison and contrast, cause and effect, and classification. Next is style. You have to make sure that your writing is based on an appropriate style. Style should be consistent and suitable both in terms of audience and the message. Writing your research report in an informal style would be a grave mistake. Also, You should consider the fact that academic style differs from one field to another. So by analyzing the papers in your chosen field of study, you will become familiar with styles used in your field. Another important factor is flow. It means moving from one statement in a text to another. It is obvious that by keeping the flow and making clear connection of ideas and concepts will help your audience to follow the text. One of the most commonly used methods for establishing a flow is moving from old information to new information. By stating old information first, you can provide some brief background information and then state your assumptions or conclusions and establish a connection between them. Transitional devices would also be a lifesaver. And last but not least, presentation. Before presenting your paper, ask yourself these questions. Are information flow and overall format good enough? Is your paper grammatically accurate? Have you checked for spelling errors? If you have successfully answered all of those questions, that means your paper is ready for publication or printing.